I think you should never be scared. Even if China is stronger, China will give you only good.
We fail to appreciate history. We fail to think. And it's cost us fiercely in that today the United States is in deep decline.
The problem with GM is not caused by Toyota or Hyundai Kia. The problem with General Motors is being caused by what? General Motors and the UAW.
We're not very competitive. We've been spending too much money on making ultimately worthless stuff.
You are making weapons, you are making tanks to kill people, okay? China is actually making cups, kettles.
所以这是最近这10几年以来形成新的经济危机的根本原因，这和过去的那个经济危机完全不一样。现在经济危机了，大家都丢掉工作了，这时候大家开始注意这个问题了。
Different. China is a very promising country. I'm sure in 20 years we'll catch up with USA.
The world hegemon has historically always been the world's most powerful economic nation. The United States hasn't been the most powerful economic nation for a long time now. And it doesn't look like it's going to come back.
The decline of the United States as the world hegemon is a necessary condition in order for China to take over that role. But does hegemon necessarily mean empire?
Hegemon simply refers to an overarching power. By empire, then, I think it's a little bit like pornography. You know it when you see it. As China unleashes its tremendous talents, as well as the power of its size and productivity, it certainly is assuming a hegemonic position, but I don't think China quite qualifies as an empire right now.
But historically, when countries have become hegemons, they eventually become empires. Rome, Britain, Germany, Japan, Russia, and let's not forget the United States.
The Americans don't realize we have probably a good 1,000 overseas military bases.
China doesn't yet have this military capability. But what happens when it becomes the world's #1 economy? Will hegemony lead it to become the world's next empire? Or does it provide a much-needed balance to American militarism? Should we be afraid?
Seeing is believing. So come to China and have a look.
Seeing is believing, so let's go. But not only to China. Let's go to the countries that surround China and see how they're being treated. Is China being a friendly neighbor? Or is it sowing the seeds of empire? China already uses its neighbors to play big country politics. Busan, South Korea. One of the world's major shipping ports, and evidence of the successful industrialization of South Korea, whose living standards now rival those of the United States. The US considers South Korea a key ally in East Asia, and it hopes that China will help to resolve the growing nuclear threat posed by neighboring North Korea. Like much US policy, it misunderstands Chinese interests. Seoul. The nation's capital has a little more than a quarter of the country's population of 48 million. It sits precariously at 50 kilometers from the demilitarized zone, separating the two sides, in range of the North's artillery. Threat of Seoul's all-out destruction in the event of further conflict has helped maintain this status quo for 5 decades. Just how serious a threat is North Korea's development of nuclear weapons?
In order for a country to become a full-fledged nuclear weapons state, the country should satisfy 4 conditions. The first condition is the possession of nuclear warhead. Yes, North Korea has acquired nuclear warhead. Second, it should have delivery capability. North Korea has a delivery capability. It has intermediate range ballistic missile, Nodong 1 and Nodong 2. It has a short range missiles such as Scud B and C. Third, nuclear testing. But there is a debate on whether it was successful or not. And finally, in order to mount that warhead on the short and medium range missiles, North Korea should possess miniaturization technology. But we believe that North Korea is short of acquiring that miniaturization technology. In view of that, we can argue that North Korea is a very dangerous country with potential nuclear weapons capability, but we cannot regard North Korea as de facto a full-fledged nuclear weapons state.
I don't find the Korean situation unstable. I've never felt that there was a threat from North Korea. I've never thought for a minute there was a single North Korean that was even slightly suicidal.
Suicidal or not, a nuclear North shifts the balance of power in Asia. Why doesn't China use its growing strength to help US-backed efforts to disarm North Korea?
One of the odd things about the post-war world is the Chinese are absolutely delighted to have Korea divided in 2. They used to try and maintain this even back in the Tang Dynasty. Korea was often structurally divided into different kingdoms with different support from the Chinese because it led to structural weakness, inability to stand up to a Chinese domination. Their policy is to prevent war and prevent the unification of Korea.
那个北韩啊，是中国政府手中的一张重要的牌。我们都知道，mafia 的教父都会衣冠楚楚的，假装正人君子一样。那他需要出去扔炸弹，需要动刀子，需要开枪的时候用谁呀？他需要一个马仔。所以实际上，你看这些年来，北朝鲜扮演的就是这样一个角色。
Initially, when let's say let's go back to the January and February 2003, what the Bush administration wanted was, press China in such a way that China would impose sanctions on North Korea. China didn't want it.
If you're going to work on Korean nuclear issues, you have to understand the Chinese context, and the fact that South Korea is rich is fine. But if Korea were unified and this rich, it would be the size of former West Germany. That's getting to be a little too big for Chinese comfort.
If Korea is a traditional tributary state that China manages through division, then how will it deal with Korea's bigger and wealthier neighbor, Japan, whose rivalries with China have spanned centuries? The answer depends not only on the intentions of the Chinese government, but also on the attitudes of the Chinese people. Like Korea, Japan has traditionally been a part of the Chinese cultural area. But it has also been fiercely rebellious. After Japan became the first Asian nation to industrialize, it used its newfound strength to create a modern empire and subjugate its Asian neighbors. Committing heinous war crimes and killing approximately 30 million Chinese throughout Asia. Understandably, there exists a strong current of anti-Japanese sentiment among many Chinese today. Although Japan was defeated in World War II, it went on to become the world's second largest economy. China, however, is now on the verge of surpassing its old rival. To many, both inside China and out, the 2008 Beijing Olympics were a symbol of China's rebirth as Asia's preeminent power. As part of the Beijing Olympic torch relay, the Chinese decided to bring the torch to Nagano, Japan, home of the 1998 Japanese Olympics, perhaps as a message to the world that the Middle Kingdom was about to eclipse the land of the rising sun. Along with this message came a tremendous display of nationalism in the form of thousands of young Chinese. Many received encouragement and even financial support for their travels to Nagano from various Chinese consulates throughout Japan. The Chinese government requested that the relay begin at Zenkoji Temple, the same starting point as that of Japan's 1998 Olympics.
Actually, the Olympic Games is a very good opportunity for China. Most of the students in China view it as a great opportunity for us to present ourselves.
However, days before the torch run, the temple announced concerns about the treatment of fellow Buddhists in Tibet at the hands of the Chinese, and refused to host the Chinese torch. The event attracted a large number of loosely associated protesters who took the torch relay as an opportunity to voice grievances against China.
Generally, we don't like the protesters because they try to insert political implications to this non-political event.
Beyond being a window on Chinese nationalism, the Nagano torch relay provided a glimpse into the situation of some of China's various ethnic minorities, and begged the question, is China really the unified multi-ethnic nation that it portrays?
In China's idea from ancient to until now, we stress harmonious. Harmonious. You know Confucius. Kongzi, Confucius? Yeah. From his period, 2,000 years ago, he teach us, be friendly. No matter where you come from, all corners of the world, we are one family. We are friends.
The Olympics provided an opportunity to see if the harmonious society was a reality or simply propaganda. We headed to Xinjiang, meaning new territory, to watch the Olympic torch relay in Kashgar. Inside Kashgar city, preparations for the torch relay were underway. In a show of ethnic solidarity for the Olympics, the authorities were preparing a large group of minority children, mostly Uyghurs, to come out and show support for the torch on the day of the run. The event itself, however, was sealed off from the public. We were struck by just how different Xinjiang was from eastern China. And we wanted to know more. Specifically, just who were the Uyghurs? Well, to begin with, they're Central Asians of Turkic origin, and they're Muslim. It wasn't until we caught up with exiled Uyghur spokeswoman Rabia Kadir at the Uyghur American Association in Washington, D.C., that we felt like we got the other side of the story.
İsmim Rabia Kadir, milletim Uyghur, ziminimnin ismi Şarkı Türkistan. Mening ziminim 1949 yılı Xitay hükümeti tarafından, Xitay diktatorları tarafından besip elingan. Xitay hükümeti biz sizlerden azatlık çıkardık, Manjulardan azatlık çıkardık, militaristlardan azatlık çıkardık. Sizlerden en bəxtli kılımız, biz sizlerge yardım kılımız, sizler şundak sanatkar, pakiz, güzel milletkensizler, şundak hoşal kılımız, dep şunçilik verdilerini bergetti. Lekin o bergen siyasetleri fakat kağız yüzüdü kılıp, Xitay pütünley özgeçe şu Abdunum Rayin degen isim bilen kapkaldık ve bergen siyasetlerini yalgan kılıp onun eksinçisiga icra kıldı. 11 sentabr vakasından keyin Uyghur halkını endi bastırdıgan fırsat, yoqtırdıgan fırsat keldi dep qaradı. Şuna Amerika Irak urushidan foydalanib Amerika bilan Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı'ga Şarkı Türkistan İslam Partiyasi degan bir narsani kirgizish uchun bor kuchi bilan xizmat ishladi Xitoy hukumati. Bu maksadını amalga oshirdi.
这个责任在布什政府，中国政府从来都有这样的企图，但是一般来说，西方国家是不会跟他在这方面合作。可是非常不幸的是，布什政府居然鼓励了中国政府，就是把新疆的这个反对派列为恐怖组织。我想这是非常不公平的。
Biz faqat mushlarning yordamiga erishyapmiz. Lekin Xitoy bizni bularga terrorist ko'rsatyapti. Ularga bizni g'arbparast ko'rsatyapti.
There are two nations which are fighting in the world. One is America, one is China. So America is using brutal way, which is war, and there is a lot of losses. And China is using a peaceful way and civilized way, where there is no loss.
They don't interfere, okay, in other country. It is not like America. It is not like America who interfere in the entire world.
The United States is one of the largest donors of foreign aid to Pakistan. But most of this money is spent on American-made arms and weapon systems. The Pakistani military justifies such spending as being necessary to defend against the imagined threat of its archenemy, India. American aid, therefore, does little to help actual Pakistanis. Fortunately for the Pakistanis, there are other nations that have undertaken development projects that have contributed greatly to the infrastructure and quality of life in Pakistan.
China has been our friend for the last 50 years. If Pakistan had any problem in the past, China came and it solved the problem of Pakistan.
The Karakoram Highway is the highest international roadway in the world. It runs over 800 miles from Kashgar in western China to Islamabad, Pakistan. The KKH is a joint venture between China and Pakistan that provides a vital link between the two countries. A quiet graveyard just off the highway commemorates the 82 Chinese workers who lost their lives in Pakistan during the 20 years it took to complete the construction of the KKH. The Karakoram Highway would not exist today were it not for the funding, hard work, and sacrifice of the Chinese.
Before the construction of KKH, the people of northern areas led a very poor life. After construction of KKH, we experienced different sort of changes, culturally, economically, socially, and politically even.
Our northern areas, there is no industry, only jobs, little jobs, and small homemade things. China is the only one of the country who provide the very cheap stuff for our people. We are 6 hours drive from our border to China, so easily we are going to.
China is so near for us, so we want to business with China.
In addition to inexpensive consumer goods, Chinese technology is also brought to Pakistan through the Karakoram.
The Chinese technology is very cheap, so the local authorities and Pakistani government accept their bids and they allow them to establish their projects. There is an agreement between Chinese government and Pakistani government for widening the KKH, for laying the railway line as well as gas pipeline. So the local population is very happy. They will benefit it.
The Chinese have also begun other mega projects in Pakistan, such as investing $200 million in the construction of Gwadar Port on the southern coast of the country.
Gwadar is considered by the Chinese as their avenue to a warm water port. A port which is strategically close to where oil supplies go through, a port which gives them access to the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea, a port that they can use as a trade corridor. So there's the whole idea of linking Gwadar through Balochistan, onwards up through northern Pakistan, through the Karakoram Highway, going on through Xinjiang and onwards into Central Asia.
While most of these plans have yet to become reality, they reflect the ongoing and serious interest of the Chinese in maintaining close ties with Pakistan. China's reputation as a friendly neighbor does not stop at Pakistan's border. It has successfully been outcompeting the US for the favor of Afghanistan itself. After nearly 30 years of war, abandoned artillery litter the landscape of Afghanistan like tombstones marking the graveyard of empires.
We have enough experience with the war. We fought the Soviets. At the end, that superpower was broken.
Despite billions being spent on so-called aid and development, the country has become increasingly dependent on opium production, with many blaming corruption and even NATO forces for the country's inability to move forward.
America wants to solve everything by the gun. Gun does not bring solution. Gun increases the problems.
Like in Pakistan, the Chinese have stepped in to fill the developmental void left by the United States.
Right now, in this reconstruction period in Afghanistan, Chinese, they are holding some construction company they have built. They are busy in some road construction.
They are not even telling our government who should be a minister, who should be a governor. All they are saying that they want to see a developed and prosperous Afghanistan.
However, like its Western peers, China's interest in Afghanistan is not purely humanitarian. Rich in mineral resources, Afghanistan remains an undeveloped source of raw materials in a world in which they are increasingly scarce. It is Afghanistan's copper that interests China. The metal is used in all aspects of modern life, including coinage, jewelry, housing, transportation, electronics, and medicine. Afghanistan's untapped Aynak copper deposit in Logar province is said to be one of the world's largest, valued at almost $90 billion.
ولایت لوگر در 30 کیلومتری جنوب شرق شهر کابل قرار دارد و این ساحه معدنی که شامل بلاک تکتونیکی کابل هست. در اینجا 3 معدن بزرگ وجود دارد که عبارت از معدن عینک، معدن دربند و معدن جوهر. البته معدن مثل عینک بزرگترین از این معدن است و این ساحه.
The China Metallurgical Group has bought a 30-year lease for $3 billion, the largest foreign investment in Afghanistan's history. The royalties alone will cover almost half of the Afghan government's annual budget. India, home of 1.2 billion people. In 20 years, it will have a bigger population than China. Its economy continues to grow year after year, and it's the world's largest democracy. Could India provide a cultural and strategic counterbalance to China?
One of the main balancing forces in the emerging world of Asia, South and East Asia, is going to be India and China. That neither is going to feel comfortable with one achieving a position of superiority, least of all any claims to hegemony.
I would assume Asia is a target for the Chinese. They would like to put Asia under its control in economic terms, in political terms, in strategic and military terms. This is where China has been active.
If you were to look around Asia, China has replaced the US as the largest trading partner for almost every country in the region.
India-China trade has been growing rapidly, and a trade route has even been opened that directly connects India and China through Tibet.
Indeed, India-China trade has crossed India-US trade in terms of sheer numbers.
There's a growing trade relation, bilateral relation between these two countries.
I think that gives Chinese a certain power, which people will look over their shoulder twice before they do or say something that gets Beijing upset.
Chinese have committed a lot of atrocities, and they've been allowed to get away with it because they've been isolated for so long. There's a period where no one knows what went on in China, and now that they've opened up, they're still sort of acting with impunity. Because of the economic incentive, countries aren't willing to speak out.
Trade has lately become very China-driven.
India is always very careful about the Tibet issue and also with its vis-a-vis with its relation with China?
I think it's a tightrope that New Delhi has to walk between its increasingly closer relations with Beijing and also keeping Tibetan refugees population satisfied as much as we can.
In March of 2008, there were protests across Tibet before the Chinese hosted the Olympics. Many Tibetans in India decided to show their support by marching towards Tibet.
When we led this march, we marched, we walked for nearly 4 months. Indian central government, they have sent us an order saying that you can't move out of this district, Kangra district.
India will not allow Indian territory to be used by any Tibetan protesters to undertake any political activities.
At Beijing's request, Delhi had its own police enforce the wishes of the Chinese government by cracking down on the protesters.
Yeah, China is very clever, and it can use any country for their own benefit at any point of time.
So when we were reaching the district border, very early morning the police stopped us. So from our side, because we were trained, what we did was we sat down on the road in the middle of the road, and we started praying. And some people were crying, and we all got locked ourselves. We started praying, and that made it impossible for them to get angry. And they have their own responsibility, they have their duty to perform. They have to arrest us.
I think perhaps I feel a bit of an affinity to the Tibetan people because my parents went, or at least my mother, I don't know about my father, went through the Cultural Revolution. It's just weighing on me a little bit because everyone thinks I'm Tibetan when I'm here, which is lovely because I've really grown to love the Tibetan people. But before I came here, I was warned by a lot of local Indian people and also tourists that had been here. When I told them that I was Chinese, they were really surprised. Some people were actually saying quite extreme things, like that people might think I was a spy from China, and that people would react negatively here. They would get angry with me, and if I'm not angry, then they would be staring at me and they'd make my stay here very uncomfortable. I had to decide whether I was going to tell people here that I was Chinese, and unfortunately I decided not to. And I think that was a mistake because I think they would have accepted me fine. Like they've got friends in Tibet that are Chinese, and they're very open and welcoming of Chinese people because that's what the Dalai Lama teaches them, to show compassion to everyone, your enemies and your friends.
India is not the only country where China tries to control Tibetans outside of its national borders.
The T word is predominant vis-a-vis China's relations with Nepal. I think what the Tibetans are doing here, what the Americans are doing here vis-a-vis Tibet is of utmost concern to the Chinese. It's pretty clear that the Tibetan protests, the Chinese don't like it. They're extremely sensitive to this, and that sensitivity is very easily brought to bear on the Nepal government.
For 10 years, a bloody civil war raged across Nepal. as Maoist rebels took up arms against the king, and the Maoists gained popular support. After the king was forced out of power in 2008, the Maoists were elected to run the new government. The party's name is a clear tribute to China's Chairman Mao.
实际上，他们不但是从意识形态上是毛泽东的那派别，而且他们一直在那个财政上和武器装备上都得到中国政府支持。
During the Civil War, Sherpas camping in the remote snowy passes of the Himalaya reported seeing caravans of ponies loaded with guns crossing from China into Nepal during the dead of night. Maoists stormed the offices of the Nepali Times and physically assaulted Kunda Dixit and his staff in an attempt to silence the press. China was able to benefit from the Maoists' willingness to destroy the freedoms of expression in Nepal. In response to pressure from China, Nepal agreed to ban all anti-China activity on its soil. China is bringing Nepal within its orbit. But what happens now? Once China controls a territory, what's in store for its future? Let's take a look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong is one of the world's most developed cities. An icon of Asia. The Pearl of the East. Hong Kong has also long been at the center of imperial disputes. It was taken by the British Empire from the Qing dynasty after the First Opium War.
过去英国的统治能在那儿存在好几十年，是因为中国经济上的需要。因为当时西方的很多工业设备和那个先进的技术是禁止卖给共产党国家，那么香港成为中国转手购买西方技术和西方的产品的一个重要的那个基地。 这是保留香港的最重要的那个原因。
After reunification, the Chinese promised to preserve Hong Kong's highly successful laissez-faire economy and its political autonomy, rule of law, and Western-style civil liberties, under a paradigm that would be dubbed "one country, two systems."
If you bumping into one Hong Kongese on the street, or ask some kind of human rights of activities in Hong Kong, what's the most sensitive test of a one country, two system is Falun Gong issue.
The Falun Gong is a modern Chinese spiritual practice that was founded in China in 1992.
Our main principles are three words, truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. And we believe that's the principle that the entire universe operates under.
Its explosive popularity scared the Chinese Communist Party. On the 20th of July, 1999, it was banned, and a brutal campaign of persecution began in the mainland. Falun Gong practitioners sought refuge all over the world, including Taiwan, Japan, the US, and even Hong Kong. Compared to China, Hong Kong remained an island of tolerance for the Falun Gong. Even today, as busloads of tourists from the mainland come to visit Hong Kong and take in the view from Victoria Peak. Falun Gong practitioners are free, under Hong Kong's constitution, to peacefully demonstrate in support of their beliefs, including displays about human rights violations by the Chinese government. On the surface, it would appear that one country, two systems is working. Or is it?
One of the issues raised when you introduce Hong Kong is whether or not the Chinese idea of one country, two systems is stable. I don't think so.
Under Beijing's pressure, the Hong Kong government routinely violates its own constitution by refusing entry to Falun Gong practitioners who try to visit the territory.
Every country have immigration control. They are entitled to refuse someone, no problem. But racial and religious discrimination cannot be a reason of refusing people to enter. So when we talk about one country, two systems, it's like, gradually really disappearing.
Is one country, two systems starting to become one country, one system?
但是收回香港那个90年代的时候，香港在政治色彩并不浓，但是现在的香港的这个残存的民主，成为好像中国民主的一个导火索，一个重要的榜样，所以共产党现在需要消灭香港的民主。
Teresa Chiu herself was deported when she attempted to visit.
Chinese leader Hu Jintao was visiting there. We have 1,000 Taiwan Falun Gong practitioners, from 6-year-old kid to 80-something aged old lady, were violently repatriated from Hong Kong to Taiwan. In detention room, we have no water, no refreshment, no place to rest. They use some kind of blanket, wrap me like this way, from here, until below the knees. So you can see how hostile they are. It's not like a free society. It's not like a pearl of the East. Why? Because the black hand, the invisible hand behind Hong Kong's government, the Chinese regime.
当中国进行经济改革，西方对中国开放那个出售技术和产品的时候啊，香港存在的意义就不大了，所以中国要收回香港。我想香港的民主可能在未来10年中会逐渐消失。
After being defeated by the Chinese Communists, the KMT, or Chinese nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, fled to the island of Taiwan and designated Taipei as the capital of the Republic of China in 1949. The KMT ruled the island under an oppressive authoritarian regime, but it was successful in creating rapid economic growth that has made Taiwan one of the most industrialized countries in the world. Eventually, the KMT's iron grip gave way to a democratic system in Taiwan, creating the first true ethnic Chinese democracy in world history. Could Taiwan be a model for the future of mainland China?
if democracy exists and is established, more is strengthened in this region, I believe it will not just benefit the people in Taiwan, but also benefit surrounding countries, especially China.
The youngsters on the mainland, they're gradually changing their worldview. They're not that inward looking anymore. They can see by themselves what's going on in Taiwan, especially in Taiwan's democratic developments.
它是一个和中国大陆的人一样讲同样语言的、同样的种族的这么一个国家，那么它的民主化对中国老百姓来说是个非常大的刺激。
In the long run, we can change the very nature of the Chinese communism, and hoping that someday that the mainland China can be converted into a free and a democratic society.
We believe that China is moving to a right direction that develops the economy and improves the quality of life of everyone, and at the same time promote the democracy and equality.
As the Chinese economy has grown, a process of normalization between Taiwan and the mainland has begun.
I hope that the mainland and Taiwan could come together to work out a better system and also be more connected.
Investment, trade, and political exchange have grown at a rapid pace.
This is a very critical moment for us to develop a healthy and better relations with Chinese mainland.
But is this ultimately good for Taiwan? Or does economic integration with China pose a threat to Taiwanese democracy?
共产党使用了很多，除了武力的压力以外，还使用了这个金钱的引诱台湾的商人到大陆去，给他们特殊优惠的政策做生意，让他们赚大钱，回过来头来再来影响台湾的政府。我想这种形式呢，对台湾的民主政权是个巨大的考验。怎样保持自己的民主政权不被共产党吃掉？
They try to create this image that, at least symbolically, that they are a peaceful country, they are rising peacefully, and they wish to deliver this sense of sincere to the world that we are rising economically and politically, but in a way that world stability will be maintained.
We need to accept that China become really a big power in the world, but the problem is that what kind of China we want in the future, in the 21st century. Some people are talking about that China may replace the United States in the future. But if this China is an authoritarian China, I don't think it's really a very good thing for the world, for the humanity.
Being a big country, being a big, strong country, United States of America should mount pressure on the Chinese government.
If the West really wanted to speak up, it would, but it chooses not to because our products come from China. We rely on China's economy.
We never ask ourselves, what do we do, however, if they get really so rich that they're richer than we are, and that we are making ourselves utterly dependent upon them.
The world is relying on China a lot at the moment, and it's too afraid to really speak up for Tibet or for any of the other issues.
I believe that the international community should continue to talk about the human rights problem, the democracy in China. If not, I believe you are just helping to create a new empire, and I believe it's not good really for the 21st century.
路，我们义无反顾，勇敢去闯。风越吹越狂，我们的步伐更向前跨，一直更远，士气更旺，逆境中停止北方。
只在乎吹起逆风的时候，是否卖力地挥动翅膀？
黑暗之中支付着力量，浑身是伤，咬牙坚强，也要捍卫着希望。
只要相信就有胆量，团结一致绝不退让，肩并肩倔强的大声唱。
越吹越狂，我们的意志越坚，士气越旺，通往胜利的路，我们义无反顾，勇敢去闯。风越吹越狂，我们的步伐更向前跨，意志更坚，士气更旺，逆境中停止北方。风越吹越狂，我们的意志越坚，士气越旺，通往胜利的路。我们义无反顾，勇敢去闯。风越吹越狂，我们的步伐更向前跨，意志更坚，士气更旺。